What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the GameFreak. Today we are going to take a look at the top 10 in sales games for the Sega Genesis. Now, people that have watched this channel, I have said numerous times, I am pretty anal when it comes to keeping all of my consoles. There is one that I do not play that I still own, and that is the C64. Not a fan of it, but every console that I have ever acquired since I was a child, from the Atari 2600 all the way up to today, the PlayStation 5, I have every single one of them. I just love video games, and it's interesting to see how some of these games have sold over the years. So I want to take a trip down memory lane and show you guys the top 10 video games for the Sega Genesis in sales. So let's jump into this. All right, so obviously every gamer knows what the Sega Genesis looks like, and mine is right here. I bought this bad boy back in 1989 when it was released. Now, the Sega Genesis is just pretty much the Sega Mega Drive, which came out in Japan in 1988. And surprisingly, the Mega Drive didn't sell too well in Japan, but it was a huge hit as the Genesis in the United States. And this is actually one of my favorite consoles ever. I love the 16-bit era. I love the 8-bit era as well. But man, there were so many good games on this. But we're going to take a look at the top 10 games that in sales for the Sega Genesis. But before we do that, I also want to give mention to their controllers. These controllers, I think, are one of the best of any console. I absolutely love the Sega Genesis controllers. I believe this inspired, can't talk right now, the PlayStation and Xbox controllers with the shape anyway. But, you know, this has 3 buttons compared to the 4 buttons plus the 4 shoulder buttons on PlayStation controllers and Xbox controllers. So again, this is just a great controller. Love this console. So let's look at the top 10 games on this system when it comes to sales. This list is courtesy of HackerNoon.com. At number 10, we have Altered Beast. Altered Beast was one of the first games to let players enjoy a classic side-scrolling beat-em-up title at home. In the game, players are able to power themselves up and transform into beast forms in order to fight mythical beasts. Its arcade version wasn't perfectly translated into the Genesis release, but it was a mostly faithful recreation that drew the attention of hundreds of fans. The Special Champion Edition of Street Fighter II made an already beloved fighting game even more popular. The first of many updates to the original game, Champion Edition provided players the opportunity to use boss characters in their fights. Series mainstays like M. Bison and Vega made their playable debut in this title, alongside new mechanics and moveset changes for the original fighters. Champion Edition was the turning point for Street Fighter, and its port to the Genesis almost certainly helped with that. Mortal Kombat 2 was among the most popular fighting games of all time. Like Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition, the game introduced numerous characters that would be part of the main roster for the series. There were also brand new fatalities that made the game bloodier than ever, sparking similar controversy to its predecessor. Despite this, Mortal Kombat 2 remains one of the most well-known classic fighting games of all time. While it might be a surprise to see it on this list, NBA Jam was one of the first sports games out there. It was released on 2 consoles at first, the Genesis and Super Nintendo, and both versions were relatively similar, but its Genesis version managed to gain notable popularity, with its later Tournament Edition being part of Retro Sanctuary's top 100 Genesis games of all time. Another side-scrolling beat-em-up series, Streets of Rage managed to be the best-selling title of its genre on the Genesis. Compared to something like Altered Beast, this game allowed players to move in a 3D-like environment and even provided cooperative multiplayer. Streets of Rage would go on to become a major franchise, recently getting a revival in the form of a brand new mainline entry. The original Mortal Kombat found most of its success on the Sega Genesis. This was partially thanks to its edited Super Nintendo version that removed more violent fatalities and blood effects. Such effects were the subject of controversy, but that just made the game more tempting for fans of the original arcade edition. If the Genesis version of Mortal Kombat didn't do well, the violence known throughout the series might have been toned down further in future titles. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and its standalone expansion, Sonic & Knuckles, drew millions of fans into the Sonic franchise. It was the first time fans were introduced to Knuckles the Hedgehog, a character that would be part of the series in nearly every other Sonic game after. With new levels, more interesting mechanics, and tighter controls, Sonic 3 was one of the best classic Sonic games out there and perhaps one of the best Sega Genesis games of them all. One of the more surprising additions to this list, Disney's Aladdin received unprecedented success. It was one of the first licensed games to end up well received by fans, containing great animation and well-designed platforming gameplay. It even contained arrangements of music from the original film. While it didn't leave behind a long-lasting legacy like other games on the list, Disney's Aladdin still stands as one of the best-selling Genesis titles out there. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was perhaps even more influential to the franchise than Sonic 3. It was the first game to introduce Tails, which allowed for a plethora of multiplayer modes and mechanics. It also introduced the supersonic power-up and well-known Death Egg robot fight, starting trends in the Sonic series that continue to this day. Only one game could exceed Sonic 2's popularity on the Genesis, and by now, that game should be very obvious. While its impressive sales numbers are partially due to being bundled with the console, it would be a lie to discount Sonic's success. Heavily influenced by and rivaling the Super Mario Bros. Series, Sonic was the first of many high-speed side-scrollers that feature the eponymous Blue Speedster. It was the success of this title that allowed the Genesis to become so well received in the first place, etching Sega's name into gaming history. Alright, so there you have it. Those are the top 10 best-selling Sega Genesis games. And you can't really argue it because that's just the way the sales went. You know, numbers don't lie. That's what the books say. So, let me know in the comments if you're surprised that maybe a certain game isn't on there that you thought would have been on there. I know there's quite a few that I was really shocked weren't in the top 10 for sales. So, I'm kind of curious to know what games you guys would have thought would have been on the list. So let me know in the comments section. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps out this channel a lot, and I greatly appreciate it. And until the next video, game on, everybody.